Times of crisis are always great times for fake news and propaganda.
Now to the growing number of hoaxes that are popping up online.
Fact-checking has the potential to be...
The communication of this information is part of our response to a global health crisis.
Welcome to Disinformation in Times of Crisis, a podcast on how media professionals can prevent the spread of disinformation.
Hi, I'm Amin, an Iranian social media analyst, and I'm recently diving more into journalism. And here with me, I have Anastasia, my talented friend, colleague, and co-host, former broadcast journalist from Uzbekistan.
Hi, Amin.
Hi, happy to have you here, Anastasia. You're listening to our first episode of a three-part series podcast called Disinformation in Times of Crisis, where we reflect on what it's like to start working in the media industry during the COVID-19 pandemic, and what lessons media professionals can learn from the current situation. And today, we are here to discuss the expanse of fake news and widespread conspiracy theories, which has led to panic among the public. I'm curious to hear your point of view on this topic, Anastasia.
When the corona buzz started, I can say that the abundance of information caused enormous panic globally, including in my home country, Uzbekistan. This was an urgent call for journalists to report ethically. I think we shouldn't be caught in a panic trap ourselves and be resilient. The question is how to do it. RNTC has developed an infodemic toolkit to help journalists tackle this combination of dis, mis, and malinformation. In this context, we've spoken to Aidan White, the founder of Ethical Journalism Network, about journalistic ethics during these unusual times.
We kindly apologize for the sound quality in advance. As the interviews were held in this crazy Zoom boom era, we asked Aidan what kind of trends he's seeing in the spread of misinformation and disinformation worldwide.
There's been a fantastic spread of misinformation and disinformation, almost as worryingly as fast as the spread of coronavirus itself. We're seeing that the information landscape is becoming more toxic and more polluted as a result of conspiracy theories, exaggeration, rumor, and speculation about this disease. And actually, it's a time when people are very worried about their physical safety and that of their families and friends. So unfortunately, people are susceptible to fake news and conspiracy theories and disinformation.
Well, indeed, I can totally agree with Aidan. Misinformation is getting more dangerous than the virus itself. That sobering comment reminded me of earlier warnings by other Iranian health officials that the real tally of coronavirus infection and deaths is definitely higher than the government admits. Another reason Iran dragged its feet in responding to the coronavirus was that it didn't want to impede arrangements to parliamentary election on February 21st. The government already had fears of low turnout due to a political turmoil in the preceding months, and that actually promoted the measurement silence over the coronavirus spread among Iranians leaders. Have you ever had any similar experience like this in Uzbekistan, Anastasia?
Yes, mis or disinformation during the health crisis can severely harm people, I'd say, especially their mental health. And there's one example from Uzbekistan, indeed, when the mainstream media itself became the source of the amplification of disinformation, when we didn't have any cases registered in the beginning of the epidemic, one breaking news was published in several renowned online media outlets. It was saying that an Uzbek citizen was tested positive for coronavirus in South Korea, not in Uzbekistan, you would say, but people realized that the danger was real exactly after that news came out. People panicked. Apparently, the news was fake. And actually, the journalist who found out that it was fake news published his story on RNTC's Debunkers database, a blog where journalists share their debunked stories about the corona crisis. In this time, we journalists should acknowledge the high level of responsibility which lies on our shoulders. People in Uzbekistan and in Central Asian region belong to collectivist culture It means that the information spreads from mouth to mouth as fast as it spreads online, and the panic spreads as fast as the information itself.
Unfortunately, this doesn't shock me, Anna. Now, this question arises that if journalists should bend their morals and ethics to cover the news, cover their faces, disguise as doctors or nurses to get enough evidence to dismantle false news? Let's listen to our specialist and founder of the Ethical Journalism Network. Aidan can explain us more about journalists' responsibility, especially during times of crisis.
Journalists have to be attached to their ethical values. They have to look for fact-based communications, accurate information. They have to show humanity. They have to take account of the needs of the audience. They have to be impartial. They have to avoid propaganda and bias and so on. But one of the things they also have to do is they have to subject to careful scrutiny all the claims that are being made, whether they're coming from researchers and scientists or governments and so on. They have to subject to scrutiny. So this is a time when journalism of scrutiny, holding power to account, questioning what is being said, are absolutely the paramount values of journalism. And that's why there's a silver lining to this terrible cloud, which is the coronavirus. It is that people now recognize the need to have access to information they can trust, to be able to understand information, to have it subject to scrutiny, to have it questioned and to have it tested. And that's why they need journalists to do that for them. So, there are enormous challenges, but one of the things I think that is also important, and I think it's being seen everywhere. It's being seen in the Netherlands, it's being seen in the UK, it's being seen in the United States. Although there are all these different bits of information coming in, we're seeing some great journalism. We're seeing journalists who are really taking this issue seriously.
Yeah, when we talk about ethics in journalism, we must reflect on how in other countries journalists face ethical challenges. For instance, in Iran, under the current ethical standards and with characteristics of the media climate, the government doesn't allow honest news to spread. And the leader himself is accordingly spreading conspiracy theories. Yet people ask the journalists to tell them the truth about what's going on, especially now where they need to make crucial decisions to keep themselves safe. Therefore, journalists still put themselves at high risk to gather factual information when and where government is no longer a reliable source and it's not thoroughly honest to us. And journalists yet try to deliver the most honest news as much as they can. And that's what I call journalist resilience.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I totally agree with you. Journalists face extreme challenges nowadays. It's getting harder to report ethically and provide only factual information, especially if a journalist reports from restrictive settings. But it is our battle to fight the restrictions and try to get clear and honest information. During this pandemic, global solidarity is of highest importance, in my opinion. The World Health Organization have tried to provide a transnational response to all the challenges, but it's interesting that their efforts have met many bumps on the road. Also from political leaders like Trump, for instance. I think journalists must navigate their way around all of this, and many of them are doing it well.
Interesting indeed, as you said, and you're absolutely right. However, for me, that is something that worries me is like, will this become a threat or work against the career of these journalists? I remember listening to Aidan's interviews actually, and he mentions how challenging this matter becomes for journalists. Shall we listen to him?
Yes.
One of the problems is that news media in these days are under a lot of pressure, particularly local news media. A lot of journalists are losing jobs, a lot of media are closing down, and it's made worse by the fact that in many countries, the governments themselves have directly attacked news media and have used the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis as a pretext for bringing in new laws and issuing new forms of control, which are designed to be repressive. So, for example, in the Middle East, we've seen Iran has suspended the internet. many countries, in Jordan, in Saudi Arabia, in Morocco, and elsewhere, newspapers and news media have been closed down, and COVID-19 has been used as a pretext for that. So, I mean, we have a massive problems here dealing with this health emergency, trying to offset the problem that's going on all the time about fake news and disinformation, but also dealing with the fact that many governments still are not ready to take responsibility for creating the democratic conditions in which their people can be told the truth about what's going on.
I'm glad this been mentioned, actually. Let me open this one very quickly. The 2019 internet blackout in Iran was a week-long total shutdown of internet. It was ordered by Supreme National Security Council and imposed by the Ministry of ICT. Unbelievable. During the blackout, Iranian citizens could only access this national information network, which was absolutely filtered by the government, and Amnesty International said there were at least 106 protesters killed in 21 cities from the witness reports. You see what we are dealing with over here? Huge gap of honesty and trust between the people, government, and of course the journalists. And somehow in between, people manage to start their riot against injustice. In a country like that, in a country like Iran, where the main media is challenged by the governments, social media plays an important role in the story. Let's get back to Aidan. He's got some interesting points about this one too. And I would like us to hear, which again, as an Iranian, sometimes I'm not fully agree with some of the points Aidan makes, but let's listen to him.
This is the time when people want access to information they can trust. They need to have a story which is telling them facts and which is going to help them keep safe. And that's why they're not going to Twitter, they're not going to Facebook chat rooms, they're not sort of relying on Instagram. They're actually going to traditional trusted brands. Newspapers like The Guardian or the Washington Post, CNN or the BBC, Reuters or Associated Press. These are absolutely critical news media that are necessary at this time. And that's being reflected in the fact that they have the number of subscribers they've got, the number of viewers and readers they've got, it's going through the roof. It's absolutely proof positive that in times of trouble, in times of crisis, people need good journalism and good news media.
This was Aidan White, the founder of Ethical Journalism Network. Indeed, mainstream media should follow the highest ethical standards of journalism, especially during the crisis we're living in right now. I can reflect in broader terms. Those media outlets Aidan just mentioned, like The Guardian, New York Times, BBC, they're not only primary sources of information for international audience, but for smaller media outlets in different countries. For instance, Uzbek journalists massively rely on their fact checks because this sphere is still not very developed there. It's a matter of funding, of course, but also the commitment of journalists to the highest standards.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anastasia, for your input. This was a pleasure having a talk with you in the studio. Hope everyone enjoyed our first episode of this series.